Welcome to another episode of Biohacking Beauty podcast, where we delve into the latest strategies for achieving youthful, radiant skin. I'm your host, Amitai Eshel, and today we're honored to have Dr. Nasha Winters with us. Dr. Winters is a globally recognized expert in integrative oncology and metabolic health. With over 35 years of experience in the healthcare industry, she's the author of The Metabolic Approach to Cancer and Mistletoe and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology. She also serves as the executive director of the Metabolic Terrain Institute of Health. In this episode, of course, brought to you by Young Goose Skincare, the company that my wife and I co founded. In this episode, Dr. Winters will share her insights on how metabolic health influences overall aging and skin aging, obviously, and leading to overall vitality. We'll explore practical wellness strategies that you can incorporate into your health and skincare routine in order to promote a youthful body and complexion. As always, our goal is to simplify the journey to youthful body and skin by bringing you expert advice and actionable tips. So stay tuned for an incredible conversation with Dr. Nasha Winters. All right, Nasha motherfucking Winters, finally on the Biohacking Beauty podcast, one of my favorite people of all times. Nasha, we love you so much.
Oh my gosh. First of all, that is like one of the coolest intros I think I've ever gotten. So thank you for that. I will down. That is great. And we've been trying to do this, but you, my friend, have been on the move literally. You are doing some really cool things. I want to hear from you too. I know this is your show, but I'm super curious. I mean, inquiring minds want to know what you've been up to because it's cool to see what my colleagues are all up to out there.
Yeah, it's been, Young Goose promised to be an innovator, and that's the road we're on. I think it's a very cool discussion as far as like what is the head of the company, what is the CEO, what does the CEO does, and I think what we are trying to do is keep true to our roots of being explorers. And so I just finished brain training, basically neurofeedback with Alice Miller, the great and powerful Alice Miller. And really, really cool.
Wow.
But Nasha, before we start,
yes,
I would have introduced you well in the intro, but how would you describe like yourself? How do you tell people what you do?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, first of all, I think a lot of folks think that I've just always been in the oncology space, and that may be true as far as my career, but it didn't start that way. In fact, I did not want to be in that space at all because over 33 years ago, I was met in that space very personally. It invaded every nook and cranny of this meat suit that I'm wearing before you today and tried to snuff my candle more than once over about a 10-year period and had a few touch and goes even in the 2 decades since then. But ultimately, I was pre-med. I was always curious. I kind of think my own sort of biohacker. And today I would probably describe myself as an integrative metabolic oncologist with a passion for metabolic health, mitochondrial function, and optimizing all aspects of our terrain and our well-being from the most tangible to the most intangible and everything in between.
Wow, this is super, super cool, a super cool way to describe it, because I think most people don't know. I mean, I've said it before on the podcast, but most people don't know that the groundwork or the ground on which the longevity community walks on was basically, it all is predicated on the hallmarks of cancer. Hallmarks of aging is actually an extrapolated version of the hallmarks of cancer. So, I mean, there is a correlation there which most people don't maybe glaze over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because, first of all, it's funny that you, in sort of the wellness and beauty industry, knows that way more than anybody in the oncology industry.
Hmm.
So I think that's
Yeah.
very interesting. That you are seeing that and hearing that and understanding that that's where that comes from. And yet, the standard of care oncology system as we know it today, even though they're the ones who came up with the hallmarks of cancer back in 2002, 2011, we added a few more, 2022, a few more to that. We are constantly looking for a single target and a single treatment to target those hallmarks. And yet, no one is asking in the standard of care community why those hallmarks expressed to begin with.
Hmm.
And I believe that that's what you in the longevity and wellness and beauty space are asking those questions. Well, why are those hallmarks doing their thing? Why are they
Yeah.
going rogue? Why are they
Hmm.
behaving in this way? And what can we do to change it instead of looking for a single target, single treatment pharmaceutical intervention? This is where you and I's paths crossed is like, how do we understand how to actually do something about it before there's a big problem and to support something if there is a problem on board?
Yeah.
A lot of tools beyond just the pharmaceutical intervention.
I think, first of all, super true. I think the difference, and I really want you to correct me if I'm wrong, the
Okay.
difference is that allopathic medicine really takes a top down approach, where it
Mm,
is first we need to, like, we are going to wait until the wheels fall off, and then we are going to try and rebuild the wagon or the car or whatever that is. We're going to look at the IKEA how to build it, whatever plan, and we're going to rebuild, whatever that is, right? And I think what we are trying to do, you, myself, anyone in the health optimization or the
mm,
optimal health or whatever you want to call that community, we are trying to have a bottom up approach, right? Like things are going to go south every day. By the way, I think something that arose from me being in an alpha state
mm.
last week is that I realized youth is a zero sum between damage and repair,
Ooh,
right? I
wow.
think it's pretty cool. So, like, basically, damage happens, like, mutations happen. The
Yeah.
body being able to tackle each and every one of them and usher them back, shepherd. It's like herding cats. I think, herding them back to the safe grounds of proper function is what a youthful body, utopian like youthful body, does. But
Wow.
every time that does not happen, and obviously it happens billions of times every day, every time it doesn't happen, this is aging, or this is things going south.
Mm, mm. Wow. It's interesting. I cannot believe I'm having such a brain fart right now on the author who spoke to this concept of even like where the healing happens is in the space, that stillness between thought, between breath, between pain, between movement forward.
Is it
And that,
Dispensa?
no, but he
Joe?
speaks it to it. It's, gosh, it's
Uh-huh.
it'll come to me later and I'll remember if I just
Hmm.
stop talking to it.
Okay.
But what you spoke to is so beautiful because that's just it. It's these little moments. We have these, as you noted, these chronic assaults. None of us can live in a bubble, and if we did, it would probably be plastic and cause us more
Hmm.
problems. But you're talking about living, like truly living and being part of humanity, right?
Yeah.
You're we hit with those assaults on a regular basis, and our bodies do an amazing job to a point until suddenly the burden might get a little heavier, or
Hmm.
suddenly the bucket fills up a little bit more. And then the uniqueness of each of us is we have our own unique threshold of, I always use the example that my husband loves to go like down the chemical aisle at Home Depot. He's a chemist. Maybe there's
Hmm.
something there, but he like loves the smell of chemistry. He loves the smell of diesel. I
Uh-huh.
can't even walk down those aisles. It makes me nauseous. I get a headache. I get really physically ill. We have a different bucket and a different
Hmm.
threshold in our bucket. His body knows how to meet that toxin and metabolize it and clear it out. And I've literally been born with deleted genes. So I'm missing these particular glutathione genes in two different places that my
Hmm.
body meets those assaults and was like, holy crap, it gets bamboozled by it. So I
Hmm.
have to work harder than my husband does to meet that chemical, metabolize it and clear it out. I have to do the job, not just my body doing the job.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's also really interesting is why this industry always has sort of like, this is the cure for all, or this doesn't help anybody. It doesn't work that way. We're all so uniquely individual. And what you were just learning last week was understanding your own body's ability to meet
Hmm.
whatever assaults it's taken physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically,
Yeah.
metabolize it and adjust and pivot accordingly, which is so beautiful. Like that is about optimization. That is
Yeah.
knowing yourself to know how to meet those challenges head on.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think a lot of the times people don't realize that a lot of the things that we think of right now as the solvable issues, the bad players in aging, for example, the easiest example to give is like senescent cells or zombie cells.
Yeah.
Everyone is now on the let's eliminate zombie cells train. But what people
Mm,
don't know is that this is actually, when we're youthful, this is a defense mechanism. This is a mechanism that, if you take, rats or whatever and eliminate their ability to drive cells to senescence, they die of cancer like immediately, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Mm,
first of all, I think we need to realize that this is one of the body's ways to actually deal with that burden. Like our body has ways to meet, basically, like to compromise on
mm,
a solution that might harm it in the long run, but at least it's not dying now. And like looking for the panacea, the silver bullet that solves everything, I think it's impossible, or the one size fits all. It's impossible because a lot of things that we're trying to solve at a micro level are good for us. We actually don't want to get rid of them completely.
yes. Wow. And it's funny because you just nailed the whole problem in the oncology space, which is where I'm very familiar. It's where I
Yeah.
hang out most of the time.
Yeah.
And that standard of care is like, oh, the cancer is bad. We that
Yeah.
must target it. We must kill it, eradicate it. And we put all of our energy there. In fact, we call it the maximum tolerated dose approach,
Hmm.
which is napalm that field as hard as you can, and you hope that the body survives it, right? And you
That it
do all
kills
of these.
the cancer before it kills you.
Exactly. That is the name of the game in standard of care oncology today. The interesting thing is that you just described something that we see in oncology all the time. We have one side that is a cancer expression and a cancer behavior,
Hmm.
and we have the next to it in parallel happening simultaneously the healthy normal expression of our cellular function and our cellular metabolism.
Yeah.
And yet, if we then try and go and fully, like, let's say, give NAD to those healthy cells for someone who's actively cancering, people don't understand that things like NAD, using things like N-acetylcysteine in the midst of active cancer treatment, using things like just plain photobiomodulation with red light in someone who's actually actively cancering, you actually may arm the cancer cells to be more resilient.
Or even heat, or even like sauna, or even like
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
Cryo, being cold.
yeah.
So you sometimes strengthen in these great, well-meaning influencer biohacking tools and tricks that are out there today. When you're like, "Ooh, I'm going to fight my cancer this way," you actually might be giving it more resources. So
Yes.
people who don't understand this simultaneous process and how to meet them, push back with one and encourage with the other, that can get tricky. And so when folks are working with someone, let's say one of your listeners is dealing with a cancer process, I sure as heck want to make sure they know to find someone who knows how to both simultaneously weaken the cancer while strengthening the terrain. And
Hmm.
so just like the other side, when you're saying, hey, this person isn't cancering, but they're trying to be like the forever fountain of youth with their longevity treatments, they're not even allowing their body to do what it was evolutionarily perfectly designed to do, which was to meet these challenges in different ways head on, so that it does have the ability to create resilience. And then I think
Yeah.
the piece you brought up, which is gorgeous, and I hope we can dig in a little deeper, is the concept. You didn't name it, but I'll name it for you: hormesis,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And you alluded to that, but those are the topics that it's like, okay, how do we both parallel push back the cancer and strengthen the terrain? How do we, when someone's not cancering, just fortify the terrain without like blocking nature's job? And number
Hmm.
three, how do we encourage the comfort and the ability to utilize hormesis in the right time, dose, duration, and
Hmm.
combination? Those are the
Yeah.
places that in the modern world today, we make it all or nothing, or all the way black, or all the way white, or all the way yes, or all the way no. And it's so nuanced and so personalized and so individual.
Yeah. Again, going back, first of all, beautiful. And I love Hormesis. We actually own the trademark for the word in cosmetics
No
because,
way.
yeah, yeah. But,
What?
uh, but we never actually use it. Anyway, but I love Hormesis because what I think speaks to many people in our field is kind of the Confucian um, approach of it was there before and we're just rediscovering it, right? Like, in Confucianism, like new is bad. So what Chinese people normally do is they say, oh, no, 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 it's not new. It was forgotten and we're just rediscovering it. So um so yeah, so hormesis is the mechanism that allowed every cell, or the response to stress, basically, is the mechanism that allowed every cell since the beginning of time to survive and led us to where we are today. Cells that did not have the mechanism that said, hey, let's stop here for a second. There is an outside stressor. We need to adapt to that stressor to make sure that we can survive and thrive. And maybe we shouldn't just like create more copies of ourselves in our weakened state, and everyone gets, depleted and dies. These cells did not survive, you know
Yeah.
so
Mm.
how do you even approach this conversation with people
Wow.
who are coming to you and they're kind of maybe in a state of shock and a little bit worried? How do you start talking to them about like hormesis and wellness and things like that?
I love that question. I mean, I personally don't think I've ever had anybody ask it quite that way. And I would say that probably the first step is to help people understand that we have evolved from a very beautiful, like a strategy that you also spoke to, adaptation,
Hmm.
right? That we can trace back. They call it the original mother, whether that is true original mother or whether that's more metaphorical.
Hmm.
That's not the point. The point is that we can track back 178,000 years ago, the original sort of mitochondria, the original bacteria that
Hmm.
has somehow made it through a heck of a lot of flaming hoops to
Yeah.
bring us to where we are today, which means it had to go through massive adaptation,
Yeah.
whether it was major environmental changes, ice ages, moving from one major geographical and geological environment to another for survival, right? I mean, that is a very powerful idea right there of these cells and these sort of adaptations were all about the survival aspect and that survival instinct, whether it's at that macro or that micro level. So I always liked people to understand that. I also want people
Hmm.
to understand that these little buggers were in bacteria, right?
Yeah.
So they take up upwards of 10 to 20% of our body mass. It will give or take depending on your body type and your size and weight, et cetera. But 10 to 20% of our body mass is made up of these mitochondria. We have made so many changes since the mid 1800s, and so many changes since World War II, and so many changes since the 1980s that our bodies cannot adapt in a way that they adapted for 170,000 years prior. The
Yeah.
changes are too many, too fast, and our Wonder Woman bracelets are failing us, right? We're not able to
they're
bounce
not
back and
they're not EMF protective enough.
exactly. Like, oh, and so this is where smart people like yourself and others started saying, well, then how can I harness that ancient wisdom, that adaptive ability, and maybe ebb and flow it in a way that I can harness the power of that and I can manipulate it in a way to make me adapt a little bit better. That
Yeah.
really is, I think, what the original goal was in sort of the biohacking community, the longevity community, the functional medicine, the naturopathic community. We wanted to take our modern bodies in this modern time that have evolved from very ancient wisdom
Yeah.
and help them remember where they've come from, where the cells
Yeah.
have come from, what it's evolved from, and use some tools to our disposal, whether it comes from nature itself or things that we've created to
Yeah.
mimic natural processes. So I always want patients to understand kind of where we've come from and where we are and the changes that have occurred in the last, let's say, 150 years that have made it difficult for our bodies to keep up.
Yeah.
And so that I love, like the hormesis piece. This is a really good example.
Yeah.
We do not want to be uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right? In our culture, anyway, you and I were just talking before we got on here about you and I live in climates that in the summer is pretty damn grueling. Now
Mm-hmm.
we have the ability to go indoors and turn on air conditioning. We have the ability to travel to another part of the world and have a different temperature experience or climate
Yeah.
experience. But there are vast majorities of people on this planet that cannot change their environment, right?
Yeah.
And so their bodies have to adapt. They can't adjust, and and they're probably a hell of a lot more resilient than you and I, in
Yeah.
comparison.
Go to
You
Boston and you'll figure it out.
you will see it pretty quickly. Like, that's why we have snowbirds or whatnot. People
Yeah.
flock away to head south and people flocking north, and just like
Yeah.
we're like ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like the place of like temperature. So always wanting 74 degrees, never going hungry. By all means, don't skip a meal for 4 hours,
Mm-hmm.
never question pain, that you should just immediately suppress that. Oh, don't
Yeah.
you dare have a fever, pop a pill for that and turn that mechanism off. Those are things we've done to make ourselves comfortable and you create a perceived safety in our
Yeah.
world around us, which have actually made us far more vulnerable and frankly far easier to kill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I agree 100%. John Randall, a really cool guy, said something very profound. He said, what your body right now has basically adapted to survive at the current, at its current environment in the best way possible. So if
Beautiful.
you want to create any type of change, you have to create the change first in the environment in which the body kind of resides in and lives within, right? Like, and I think hormesis is basically that. How do I introduce environments that are going to move the needle and move where my body is towards where I want it to be.
I love that. I love that
Mm.
so much. And I love, there's also something about that that speaks to our habitual nature,
Yeah.
our human mind habitual. So
Mhm.
we get into the routine of, well, I go to the gym 3 times a week and I do this particular exercise for this duration of time and this duration of intensity. And then I go home and then I wonder why I'm at a crossroad or why I'm at
Mhm.
a stall, that I've stalled in one particular way. Or
Mhm.
I go and I get my ice plunge every single day at this time and do my thing. Like when we get into that habituated state, routine is really good on one level, but even on heart rate variability, we can test that the more sort of
Mhm.
variety, more diversity to your
Mhm.
environment, the more robust and resilient you become. And we can
Yeah.
actually measure that. But if you get into a chronicity, which is not normal, so let's even say taking a pharmaceutical, let's say even a
Yeah.
thyroid medication, does your thyroid think that it runs at 1.5, milligrams of what X, Y, and Z every single day of the year?
Mhm.
No, ever, never. Or exogenous hormone replacement therapy or anything else. Like we are cyclical.
Yeah.
Men cycle. You guys cycle like every hour, or at least a couple times a week,
Yeah.
a
A
day.
day. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, why do we somehow think we are going to be smarter than the endogenous rhythm that our bodies have been striving to create and maintain for millennia? It's just incredible to me.
Yeah. And we can see it even with like longevity drugs.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, again, like let's say rapamycin, right? Like the drug that is now the holy grail for senescent cell elimination.
Yeah.
The magic does not come from just popping that drug the same way you would if you had like a heart implant, right? Because what that's what they're supposed to do, like suppress your immune system. The
Right.
longevity magic is when you modulate
Yes.
that drug being in your system. Okay,
Mhm.
obviously in any case you're not going to pop a pill every 2 minutes, right? But the modulation of the concentration of that drug in your blood is what causes the positive effects and not a cyclical rhythm. 100%. Also, something very interesting is that we also learn, like they did a very interesting study. I'm blanking on where, but maybe UC Berkeley. But the conclusion was that the best frame of mind for
Mm.
our brain to embed knowledge or to keep knowledge is in a mild state of irritation,
Mm.
where we're trying to adapt to something new. In general, it is, as you said, it is our goal to have the body understand this is a new field and it needs to adapt,
Mm.
and not constantly, but obviously in modulation.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
love this. I love this. So I'm curious, like, because I know how I look at this from a very oncology centric place and down
Hmm.
getting very like I can get very, very myopic down into the metabolic pathways and down to the cellular respiration of
Yeah.
the mitochondria and the complexes. I mean, I can get as super focused in, but I'm
Yeah.
I'm way more comfortable to bring it back out to the big picture because I
Yeah.
think that what happens with both patients and clinicians is we get sort of seduced by the
Yeah.
sex of the latest target and the latest pathway or the latest off-label drug or the latest
Yeah.
anti-aging miracle. And so, but we forget the fundamentals, we forget the basics. So if I have a patient who's like, I'm eating perfectly right, I'm doing my exercises, I'm taking all my right supplements. And yet, when I really dig deep and realize that they're either living in an environment that has certain toxicities, maybe they're living on a
Hmm.
busy roadway that's just
Hmm.
constant
Yeah.
amount of particulates in their environment that's really causing harm to a well functioning immune system, or
Hmm.
they're in a partnership, in a relationship with someone who, people forget you are the result of the 5 closest people around you. So if any of
Yeah.
those 5 people are draining
Yeah.
your energy, you need to rethink that, right? Because that's a big one, which means you cannot heal in the environment in which you have
Yeah.
gotten sick. And then even down to, okay, are you living up on like the 7th floor and your feet never ground and you are not tapped into the, maybe the negative ions of the earth around you? Those are the simple things that we forget. We forget, are you drinking quality water? Are you breathing quality air? Are you
Hmm.
knowing when your sun is setting and sun is rising? Do you know the phase of the moon? Those
Hmm.
sound so hippy dippy, all, farmer's almanac, weirdo-y, but they're the fundamentals that remind all of our clocks
Yeah.
that are internal from our superchiasmic nucleus to the cells themselves that have their own clocks. And then
Hmm.
the clocks within the clocks, super,
Hmm.
super cool. And the clock genes and
Hmm.
whatnot that are interfacing with this. If you've forgotten the fundamentals, your body goes awry pretty darn quickly. And no amount of biohacking or medicating or supplementing or dietary interventions are going to touch it if you do not
Yeah.
get back to the rhythm that you were designed from.
Yeah. As they say, you can't wellness your way out of it. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
I
Well,
agree.
way out of it. That is so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So I love that you said about the partner, but I think obviously you meant, any type of like the tiger is gonna eat me, proverbially scenario, right? That's kind of the major outline there, like a existential threat that doesn't exist, right?
Right, right, right.
How-
Boy, honey, I wish I could think. You just made me think about the book about there was this amazing discussion about these antelope, basically,
Mhm.
that were still what they call it, like running from ghosts, that the
Mhm.
predators that used to chase them don't even exist anymore. And yet
Wow.
nervous systems are still activated as if they are.
First of all, I think we should call this podcast, "What's the name of this book?" Uh,
You're getting me at the end of a very long workday where I'm like blanking on every name and author. So I'm liking this. It's like we're playing our own version of a game show and the answers and
Ah, okay, we're gonna put a challenge. If people like, if but people can Google it. I was like, okay, if people can know all the books that we're saying, but if someone writes all the books that we're saying in the comments, we're gonna get them something. I don't know.
I
We're
will
gonna
I
think
will
about
put I'll throw in a prize too. You
it.
tell
Cool,
me.
cool, cool.
We'll with this all the time.
uh, but yeah, so obviously we can see it. We can see it in many parts of our society, and I think it's to get philosophical here for a second. it's not that we don't need it. So Richard Dawkins actually has a new book.
Really?
Yeah, something that you said reminded me what he's talking about there. It's a takeoff on the Book of the Dead, but I forget the general premise there, or even what reminded me. But Richard Dawkins has another great little explanation on
Mm.
how the evolutionary instinct to believe in a higher power evolved. And that's super, super interesting, where he
Wow.
says you are as an animal, as an evolutionary item, you are pre-programmed to attribute causation to
Mm.
scenarios. So if there is a rustle in the trees, or if the door opened,
I
someone
was like,
opened it, right? But like if there is a rustle in the vegetation, and you are a little animal drinking water,
mm,
you need to know, your brain immediately says something caused this. Now, am I in danger or not? But the jumping to the conclusion that this is not caused by nothing is an
right.
evolutionary trait. If I run away every time, I'm going to die of thirst. If I never run away, I'm going to die of someone else's hunger, let's call it that,
Mhm.
right? And
Oof.
obviously that we our brain, since it's completely, basically like evolved past the need to just survive, attributes it now to other things. So whether, if a million years or 178,000 years ago, we attributed it to thunder, right? Or even 500 BC, we had the god of thunder. And nowadays we attribute it, or since then we attribute it to different things, someone dying, someone living, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And but this is an evolutionary capability, or evolutionary need that we have. And we kept it, right? We kept it, even the antelopes kept it, even though the predator is not there. And we kept it as well. So we have tendencies to have a baseline. We have a baseline of how we perceive reality. And in my opinion, we will always meet the level of anxiety, the level of getting ready for action, the level of fight or flight that we would have met if there were real predators. Just now, within
Wow.
our equilibrium, they are assigned to the deadline I have at work, or the person that told me that they don't like the smell of, I don't know, a product that we made, right? Like it always is being met. The question is, and that's why maybe we need hormetic practices
Mm.
that challenge our that really put us in an extreme: cold, hot,
Yeah. Yeah.
exercise, lack of oxygen, whatever that is, even if emotionally and mentally.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's fast. And to even think it's like those hormetic resources are also what helps us shake it off, right? When you're meeting that again and again, because
Yeah.
most of us are staying in a place where, I mean, I'll ask patients about their life and they'll say, I'm not in stress, but I can look at them. I
Mhm.
can look at their labs. I can look at their medical and personal and family history. I can look at the dynamic or the situation in their life. I can look at their wearables devices,
Mhm.
their Aura rings or their BioStraps or whatever HRV technologies they're accessing.
Mhm.
I can look at their insulin response. I can look at their inflammatory markers. I can look at their immune system. I can tell if they're in a suppressed state of immune function or not based on this ongoing description you just made. It's like, do we still think we're in a perceived state of threat? And how are we responding to it? And how do we move on from it? Because we do need these stressors to keep us alive.
Yeah.
We do need pain and discomfort to remind us and shake us awake, if you will. But when we stay in it for so long and we become that proverbial like frog in the boiling water, that you sit in
Hmm.
there and you're like, really
Yeah.
comfortable. We're turning up the heat and turning up the heat and turning up the heat. And then suddenly you're a boiled frog.
Yeah.
That's also not good. Right. And so
Hmm.
these opportunities to kind of shake, be like a globe, like a snow globe where you shake it up and let it resettle out in
Hmm.
different ways. That's some of the tools that we can bring through with these mindfulness practices of today. So, sort of giving meaning of, well, why like did that door just open? Well, my dog was stressing out and she was letting the people on the other side know, and they attended that. But our own lives were doing that all the time. So first I want to go read that book. Sounds
Hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And second of all, you just came from a workshop around sort of re-engaging this inner wisdom. Like, what tools did you walk away with that you learned to maybe apply in your day-to-day life so you can meet those challenges, those assaults in a different way?
So I think, I am a very bro-ish type of guy. I
Okay.
love the challenge of seeing if I'm going to quit when things get rough, right? I come from a special operations background, and I'm a black belt in jujitsu, and I do this and I do that. That is where I feel, I wouldn't say comfortable because that's part of being uncomfortable, right? But that is where I get my dopamine hits.
Okay.
And I think that this is, first of all, especially as a longevity guy, this is finite because there is a reason it's called a Goldilocks zone, or that's why I said, it's a dose response, as you mentioned, type of scenario where there is a minimal and a maximal dose response that our body can handle of anything. And I can tell you at stressful times, or obviously young goose is growing, and there are growing pains. There is always stress. Now it's Black Friday. Let me
Oh,
tell you something. There are some mistakes in shipping,
oof,
unfortunately.
oof.
Sorry to everyone who got their bioretinol mistaken with Procare over there. Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
so um, but to me, the easiest thing to do is to burn it off, right?
Ah,
But you cannot burn off everything all the time.
right, right, right.
So I think what I got from this seminar, it's also very important to explore your mind. This wasn't a seminar, by the way. Whatever it is this week, it is always also important to recognize how your mind behaves with minimal stimulation. Where is
Mm,
your mind going? Like being conscious of the how your mind invents the tigers, right? How your
right.
mind operates again at minimal stimulation, and where it goes, and recognize it, and maybe detach your visceral response with your identity or with what's going on within. I think it's as important. I think it's, to me, by the way, as a human being, it's harder to do the yogic type of practice and sit in stillness.
Wow, you just reminded me. I mean, I think that part of my, I alluded to in the beginning of our conversation that I'm 53 now at the time of this recording, and I was diagnosed with terminal ovarian cancer when I was 19 and given less than
Crazy.
3 months to live. And so that ability to meet it head on and just be kind of the warrior and just go through, that was a strategy that worked for me to stay alive. And it was a
Mhm.
strategy that pushed me into places that were okay, like the only person in my family to go to college, the only person to rise, like to hit obstacles and go over them, through or over them. So it was a really powerful strategy until the last few
Mhm.
years, where that strategy of sort of hitting it head on or powering my way through it, that is what worked really well for too many decades, that actually gave me a lot of accolades and experiences in life, is no longer having the same benefit. And in fact, may start to tear things down and break things apart. So I appreciate that you said that the most difficult thing for me to do is to sit in stillness and to
Mhm.
sit in quietude. And I remember a few years ago, I was in India, I was there learning. I was there learning Ayurvedic medicine. I was working in a hospital setting, and I got very, very sick, very, very sick.
Wow.
And I was far, far from a hospital. I had an iritis, which is a medical emergency, which people
Wow.
can go blind from. So it was major, and I had to. No one spoke English, and I had to go into the fear of I could go blind, the fear of not being able to communicate my needs, the fear of the unbelievable pain and the fevers and the literally pouring of massive amounts of pus this color out of my eyes,
Wow.
um, looking like the devil and certain I was never going to recover from this. And I had to surrender. I had to surrender that these folks knew how to get me through this. And through the miracle of them finding a little bowl of these tiny, tiny white flowers and pressing them and knowing exactly what to do with me, to
Wow.
the 5 women sit on me, these tiny little Indian women sit on this giant American woman and drop these little white drops in my eyes that felt like a million bee stings in my eyes, or I was screaming and bucking
Wow.
women all over that room. The process, I tell you, it's like I had to then sit. They said, "You cannot have light. You cannot open your eyes. You have to sit in stillness." I had to sit with this omelet cake on my head to cool the fire of the pitta that was raging through me, to cool the infections and drink these horrible decoctions, sit in absolute silence for 10 days out of the sunlight.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
that was like the hardest thing. Cancer was easy compared to that experience.
Oh my
And
God.
so it humbles me when you talk about that moment, because the thing I had to then wrestle was my mind. And I had to
Yeah.
wrestle that fire for days, and that was torture. So it was helpful. I need to do that exercise, by the way, not to that intensity. I've asked for different instructions this time
Uh-huh.
around. I need to do that at least on an annual basis for
Uh-huh.
me to get still enough to actually metabolize and ingest all the things that's coming at me every day. There's a
Uh-huh.
lot of gifts that I miss when I'm in my go, go, go mode.
Yeah.
And so it's also important for us to ingest the gifts of it all, not just the challenges of it all.
Yeah, and it also, I completely agree, and it also even goes beyond. You ended nicely where it ties to everyday life. Like it also, you know, um, I remember when we started Young Goose, I was obsessed with customer service. I
Mhm.
was obsessed with being the person to address customer service, and within the scale of the company, then that was the best thing to do because that made sure obviously happy customers is very important, but also that we make the changes that we needed to make in order for things to function optimally as things go on. When we reached a certain scale, when I had to answer 10 times a day, hey, how many pumps should I fill in the blank, or does this go with that, or I have this product, all the questions that are very, very important,
Mhm.
but they
Mhm.
are important to that person and not for everyone. I needed to know to how to graduate and move
Mm.
on, even though that was something that was very important for me
Wow.
personally. And that is something that you can only there is a lot of ego going on. There's a lot of obviously fear and I would say obviously like the um, the aspect of change and resisting of change. But I think that is the adventure of an entrepreneur. I actually am a
Mhm.
100% sure that it's very similar with your programs. Like I'm 100% sure when you were a person, 33 years ago, going on your own journey, or 10 years later, educating other people, or 20 years later, educating the educators, you
Right,
know,
right.
this is almost like the Venn diagram of the person that you need to be is
Mm,
extremely is extremely the circles are very, very seldom overlap.
right. Wow, that's very astute and very true.
Yeah.
It's like I approach, and I also remember struggling and still do, whenever I need to evolve to the next level, to go up to
Yeah.
the next level, it's really hard to let go of the previous, it's hard to shed the skin of who you were,
Uh-huh.
to move into where you're supposed to be or who you were to become.
Uh-huh.
And that also can be a place, that friction, that peeling away of what your identity or your role is or was, whether it's as a parent or as a business owner or as a patient or as a lover or whatever,
Hmm.
when that role no longer suits you and you're called to something different, it's in that transition that can be very dangerous, that can create a lot of friction, that's very, very uncomfortable. And you can either see it as like, oh crap, this sucks, or you can see it as, wow, this is intense, but man, am I learning a lot, and man, is this going to make me a better X, Y, and Z. And so to more lean into it, that is part of that is hormesis, right?
Yeah.
Lean into the discomfort,
Yeah.
is hormesis. Staying put where it's familiar and comfortable is where the poison is.
It's no Mises.
Oh, that's
Just
a
no
oh,
Mises.
dang, that's a
so
word.
Nasha, I want to there are people here who tune in because they just don't want more wrinkles. They don't care about
Great.
anything else. And we love those people too.
Absolutely.
Um, so I want to shift our conversation a little bit.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, so we spoke about, obviously, so I just want to anyone who doesn't know, uh, Nasha, when people in the longevity community talk about cancer, first of all, they refer to Nasha. They say, Dr. Winters says this, and that is the adopted stance, right?
Oh,
So we need to understand that your perspective is basically you're a thought leader right now within the space, or you are the thought within the space,
well, depends on who
quite
you're talking
frankly.
to. Yes, there you go. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, if again, if it's the aloe vera and the no, never mind. That's a joke from before. Anyway, so let's start with longevity in general.
Yeah.
We talked about hormesis, and we can definitely mention it again. But from your encounters with people with the oncology space,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
can you derive from that space and superimpose it on health
Mm.
optimization?
So good. So good. Well, I mean, first of all, I look at the work that I do and the work you do. It's like I feel like you and I are coming to the same point.
Yeah.
You might be from the outside in, and I'm coming from the inside out.
Hmm.
We're meeting this beautiful place that is the person and their expression of themselves, of how they see themselves and how the world
Hmm.
sees them, and how they're able to express their inner and outer beauty,
Yeah.
their inner and outer vitality, their inner
Yeah.
and outer longevity. And so I do think, I mean, first of all, just even in my world, chronic illness and disease itself, as well as the treatment for such, can really wreak havoc on how you perceive yourself and the outside world perceives you.
Yeah.
You can really lose sight of your own strength when you're not feeling good about yourself. And so I absolutely give high creds to any tool that is going to make someone feel good from the inside out and the outside in. And I think
Hmm.
that the wellness and beauty space has an opportunity to do it well, and
Yeah.
to do it in a way that heals and regenerates in a way that's different than like the L'Oreals of the world, right? That's just like, let me just put on the mask and, of chemicals, and you look good for a hot
Yeah.
second, but not actually fixing anything. This
Yeah.
is what you and Young Goose are about, is about really bringing in things that are restoring and replenishing and regenerating
Hmm.
that outer beauty to meet the inner beauty, and vice
Yeah.
versa. So I do want to really say that in the oncology space, there's a similar thing that happens. They're kind of like the L'Oreals. They're like, we're just going to throw this pill at it. We're going to kill it. And then you're going to be good. You're going to ring the bell and you're done. No, you're just getting started. Now it's time to understand, well, why did I end up with this, you know,
Hmm.
expression? Why is my skin behaving this particular way? Why is my, wrinkles show more profound now? Why do my squint lines look more in this place? It's not just a natural aging process. I look at my mother, who smokes like a
Hmm.
chimney, who's almost 78 years old. She has less gray hairs than I do,
Hmm.
And I look at the way she meets the world. She doesn't meet it with as much intensity and stress response as I do.
Hmm.
And yet she
Yeah.
has a lot of diet and lifestyle factors that are far like ferocious. Like my friends and family call her my worst patient, right? Like
Yeah.
the little pieces, but she approaches life differently than I do. And so I learn a lot from her of how to meet the outside world and my inside world in a very, very integrated way. And I feel like the
Hmm.
types of tools you bring to the table and the types of things I want patients to know there's a better quality to meet their inside and outside beauty. This is where we need to help each other
Yeah.
because they're going to be looking at, they want to look and feel their best. They want the outside world to see what they actually feel and who they really are, or they want something to be a crutch to help them onto the other side. Well, this is what standard of care is always trying to do. Here, take this pill and you'll feel better. Here, take this cream and you'll feel better. Here, just do
Hmm.
this thing.
Hmm.
It's the temporary fix, but I get a sense that you guys aren't about the temporary fix. That's what
No, and
differentiates in the
I,
world out there.
I agree. And also to your point, like, what comes to mind is the whole Blue Zones project, and kudos to them for bringing awareness. Really cool to look at this guy's Dan's like journey in life and how big it has become. Quite frankly, an inspiration. Great. What bothers me is that no one spoke with the people about their mindset. Like no one spoke to them about their like communal
Right.
um rituals. Or like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
they drink wine together. No, it's the together. It's not the wine part. You understand that, right? Like it.
Yes.
So that is where I feel like talking about ancient wisdom and reconnecting to it. I have I have yet to find a better drug than community.
I Okay, first you just brought this full on shine the light on where this needs
Yeah.
to go of the conversation, which is so perfect because let's just use that example, the blue zones.
Uh-huh.
We're looking at causation, causation correlation,
Yeah.
and we're all giving credit to the diet, which is
Hmm.
actually a bit manipulated in how they perceive the
Yeah. Yeah.
diet to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But what we're really missing is what you just said. And this is also the piece when I'm teaching clinicians and when I'm out on stages and when I'm talking to patients, I talk about my version of the CDC. So the Centers of Disease Control, my version of that is circadian rhythm, diet, which sometimes includes quality or changes of timing or
Yeah.
avoiding it altogether, and a community. And so
Hmm.
where we were given all the credibility to a particular diet being what's keeping you on this planet longer or the wine, it really is when you look at this, like especially in Greece, I've spent a lot of time there. I love that part of the world. The real issue is that they fast an upwards of 250 days a year, an intermittent
Hmm.
fast of that because it's part of their spiritual construct. It's part of their communal construct. And
Hmm.
they take turns, at least on the islands, going to each other's little family church. So every time they go, like this week, I'm hosting church. This week I'm hosting church.
Hmm.
It's not even about church. It's about the
Hmm.
community and the whole, ethos around it and sharing and being a contributor to an experience is so so powerful. And
Hmm.
so even what I think what the sort of longevity and biohacker and functional medicine community has done actually quite well is create a sense of community, even
Hmm.
if they end up being kind of walled off in certain ways or siloed in certain ways. There's a lot more benefit to the actual creation of the community versus the actual product in many ways
Yeah.
itself.
Oh,
And so that's not to dismiss that you've created something really wonderful here, but you've done so through a very different lens. And what I feel like I do with patients is help them understand themselves through a different lens and understand cancer through a different lens. That anything we're experiencing, like anti aging,
hmm.
anti-cancer, anti-hypertensive, depression
Hmm.
drugs, any of those assume that you're against something or that
Hmm.
something is perceived as a threat or as an enemy. And instead, the way I approach this with patients in my world, and I believe you and yours, is that this is a natural evolution. Our cells
Yeah.
are actually doing a really cool evolutionary process. We want to understand why, and we want to help remind them that they're part of this bigger ecosystem, that they're
It's
a
it's
welcome member of the table. And how do we bring them back into the fold?
it is so spot on. And the reason is this, and especially in skin. So, and it really ties in both of what you said right now and kind of where we were before really ties in. Number one, especially with women, we can see that a more stark kind of waypoints because women's hormonal changes. Although
Mm,
we've waxed some poetry before about circulations.
Right.
Women have kind of two stop points, which is like perimenopause and menopause, which we can see significant changes in even the body's decision, like a decision tree, as to
Mm,
what
interesting.
processes are being maintained and upheld, and what
Yeah.
processes are basically being either fallen to the wayside or changed. So we talked about like
Mm,
senescent cells, but other ones as well. Um, and what happened is that, first of all, obviously, as someone that as a biohacking community that is trying to preserve youth, we can talk about how do we kind of trick the body to believe it still need to uphold some processes. But on a larger scale, when we're talking about human beings, what happens is that the body is saying, hey, instead of being valued for my reproductive ability, I
yes.
now justify my evolutionary existence, or my evolution justifies my existence within a 55-year-old body that is going through menopause, or a 39-year-old, or a 7-year-old, by the knowledge and intergenerational um, communication I bring, or intergenerational knowledge I bring to the table. That is why evolution has kept me here, right?
Oh my
And
gosh. Yeah.
it's pretty cool, because what you
Yeah.
are saying is, again, here, this is who I am right now, and the ability of my or the feeling that I have that I'm a contributing member is
Mm,
literally what keeps me alive. Even if I'm going to get a facelift, a boob job, nip and tuck,
hmm.
Botox,
Yeah.
and inject salmon. It's a real thing. Inject salmon sperm into my face. It's a real thing.
Well,
It's
there
not
you
a
go.
joke. Yeah,
Okay.
even
News.
all of that, yes, well, by the way, people can just use that the spermidine in our product. They don't need salmon sperm, but hey, if the Kardashians do it, it must be good. But what I'm
Oh,
saying is, within all of that, we need to
yeah.
understand that the best cue that we can give our body when it's past its
Mm,
reproductive prime is that you believe that you're a functioning and contributing member of the society. That's the
mm,
number one cue.
that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. I'm gonna tell you, it's funny in oncology, there's actually plenty of research that shows this, that those who have, so I always ask these three questions of patients: what brings you joy? For what are you grateful? And what is your purpose?
Hmm.
If people cannot answer those three questions, their prognosis is very poor. But the
Hmm.
most important of those three questions is purpose.
Yeah.
And if they can't say, like, this is why I am still here, or why I'm still choosing to be here, or why my body is still allowing me to be here,
Yeah.
they often aren't for much longer. And
Hmm.
so that really speaks volumes to what you just described, is like, what is my next role? What is the next piece here? And I think I'm a strange woman on this planet. I'll just say this, because I wasn't expected to see the end of my 20th year on this planet. So the fact that I could go through and see what it was like to be a woman in my 20s, and to see what it was like to be a woman in my 30s, and what it was like to be a woman in my 40s, and now a woman, getting deep into my 50s, I did not have the same concerns when my body and my skin and my hair and my things started just changing. I'm the weirdo that started celebrating, like, "Oh my god, my first gray hair. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so excited about having wrinkles because I smile like a mofo, and I love being able to say that I created these, and that, this little jellyfish, this little softer belly when I used to have rock hard abs is like, my husband like, "Oh, I kind of like it." Like you just like find these ways that you're moving into your body and being that, because I'm allowed to be alive, because I look at it differently. But I also appreciate if women did not have that experience, or men did not have
Yeah.
that experience, this process could be very scary. And it's like, well, how do you become more curious about it? How do
Yeah.
you lean into it? How do you explore it and see what is true for you? I think that's exactly what you and a lot of this industry is allowing for folks to have. But my hope is that it becomes less structured of this is how it's supposed to be to this is how it feels for me now in this moment. And it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And by the way, going back to hormesis, which we spoke before,
Yeah.
there is basically the center of there is a center in the brain, and I think you talked about before, but there's a center in the brain that is correlated with doing things that we do not feel like doing, that we want to do. So basically, doing things that we are of feeling an aversion towards, like a cold plunge, for example. And by going through and doing things that we don't like to do, this center grows. And research, basically, growing amount of research is showing that this is correlated with it's kind of the center of willpower, but it is also the center of lust for life.
Oh,
And that bigger center, so it grows the more you do things like that. And that center, the bigger it grows,
mm.
that also reflects on, first of all, surviving scenarios that might have killed you, like, for example, cancer, but also in general longevity. And the idea is that you can have a clear image of why you are here, or resisting the temptation of dying, basically. And obviously it correlates with purpose.
Yes. Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, and I love that, and I again, there's another book we'll have to come up with where that was from, but it's so powerful to me that I think that what we're speaking I mean, you speak to it beautifully here. I mean, we've touched on concepts of
Yeah.
hormesis, we've touched on concepts of community, we've
Yeah.
touched on concepts of curiosity,
Hmm.
we've touched on concepts of being, even if you're not exactly thrilled with a place that you are in your life at any
Hmm.
moment, understand that nothing is permanent
Hmm.
and that it's a process. And I think a lot of people can get stuck in the trap of permanence of thinking this is the only way. I know I was in that place. That's how I was prior to my diagnosis. I
Hmm.
actually tried to keep my life on 2 occasions prior to my diagnosis because I
Wow.
felt like the trauma in which I came from and the background in which I came from and the resources I had access to, which were very limited, left me very stuck. Right. And so I didn't believe that there was another way around. And so when you don't have that ability to sort of see another path forward, you can get stuck in that place of not even getting curious about the what is or what could be. And so I think that speaks volumes as well to this. And I don't know, I love meeting folks like you on this journey who you've taken a company that on the outside world people would look at and say, oh, this is just skin deep. But what I've known about you the very first instant I met you, like it was like you and I didn't even like have to say much. We were just like, hi,
Yeah.
new best friend, where have you been all my life? This sweet bond of
Yeah.
connection. You go way beyond the skin, my friend. I mean, you are so much about helping people see themselves in a different way and be able to meet themselves in a new way. And that is something powerful no matter which path took you to that point. That is a very powerful, powerful, powerful medicine.
Thank you very much. Actually, I agree with you, and it actually is a great. I take. I'm very grateful that it actually makes sense, business wise,
Mhm.
because placebo is 30-40% of the results of any treatment.
Yeah. It
So
often exceeds treatment results. So nothing wrong with placebo.
no, no, no. By the way, I remember having a discussion with someone about homeopathy, and they were like, "Rah, rah, rah." I said, "Hey, my friend, even if you don't believe in it, let's say you are poo-pooing the entire industry of homeopathy, which I am not a sage or a cleric or whatever. I am not the one to tell you. I don't have an epistemological truth to imbue here. But I'll tell you that it's the only legal way to prescribe placebo, and that is
Mhm.
pretty strong. But having said that, like, I think a company like a skincare company does not make sure that their users are regarding the product in the most affectionate,
Hmm.
um, whatever, right? Like the best uh, mind space that they can, especially
Right.
while they're using the product, is limiting the efficacy of their ingredients, of their formulations. I mean, they're depriving the user of like 30-40% of the result.
Wow. Yeah. Huge. Huge. Amazing. Oh,
Listen, Nasha, we try to keep this under an hour. I am the worst at it,
you're doing beautifully,
but
my friend. We did this good.
listen, I really, obviously, this has been a podcast where it was really fun to talk with you. We didn't really talk a lot about oncology, but um, obviously, obviously, this is something that when it meets you, you need to have. There is a reason that all the lawyers that are like car crash lawyers, they have a very catchy, phone number to call, right? You need to have a very clear idea on the route that you are going to take, or at least the first steps that you're going to take. So
Yeah.
maybe we should start with like, who is the person, even outside of oncology, who is the person uh that normally wants to work with you, and
Sure.
then like how do they do it?
Sure, sure. Well, of course, usually this is the most common person who reaches out to somebody like me or somebody I've trained because I
Hmm.
no longer work directly with
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
patients, treat clinicians globally, but I still consult with these doctors about their patients. So they get
yeah.
me secondarily. First of all, that's a place that sadly most people who reach out to us are folks that we're their Hail Mary. They've now
Yeah.
exhausted all approaches. I wish that people would find us as their first resort versus their last. That number is changing. That percentage is changing, and more people are calling us at the beginning of their diagnosis or their beginning of their journey. Ultimately, cancer is best prevented by just
Hmm.
not getting it, right? So prevention is just true prevention is the only real cure for
Yeah.
cancer. And so ideally, I would love to be able to support people on how to become aware of this container and everything they put in, on, and around it, and how it may contribute to disease or health creation. That is the ultimate. And then the other is folks who have a strong family history. So I actually work with a lot of folks from like the Jewish community, for instance, with like Ashkenazi Jewish background, ATM, Lynch mutations, BRCA mutations, things like that, that have a higher, what they call high penetrance genetic
Hmm.
familial tendency towards cancers. There's so much. It's not about going and lopping off your body parts and taking a pharmaceutical. There's actually a lot that can be done to change the way your body methylates and detoxifies, which is actually what those gene problems are all about, is that you just don't repair your DNA as well as say the other person. So there's a lot of tools in our toolbox to help you repair your DNA better. So there's places to come in the prevention place, the familial tendency place, as well as during the journey or after for the cleanup. And so folks usually start with my book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. Some who've already read that get really excited about my work and research in mistletoe, which is the oldest integrative therapy in cancer, really well described and characterized in over 2,500 studies universally, over 250 really good, randomized studies. The person who wrote the foreword to our book, Mistletoe and the Future of Integrative Oncology, is the head of solid tumor oncology at Sloan Kettering. It's not like this is an alternative by any means, right? That, and then our website, mtih.org, which stands for Metabolic Tree Institute of Health.org. This is where we do all of our nonprofit research, novel formulation, novel delivery system development, cell respiration studies, mitochondrial studies to take the research to the next level. It's also where
Hmm.
we bring in our nonprofit to help patients get access to funds to help them pay for care that's outside of standard of care, because unfortunately a lot of the therapies that can really help someone later in their cancer journey are not covered by you know standard medical systems in other countries or by our insurance model in the US. And then my website, Dr. Nasha, DRNASHA.com, has a ton of freebie resources, including like what do you do if you get like a little download of what to do if you get diagnosed with cancer, kind of a little step by step, as well as tons and tons, hours and hours, days and days of podcasts and interviews and lectures that are all free for you to ingest and consume and learn and empower yourself and share with others. So a lot of ways to stay engaged. There's a great newsletter you can take part in and see what we're up to. But these are the types of relationships I'd like to cultivate, are people who are bringing, because beauty isn't going to go away. Our desire
Yeah.
to be beautiful isn't going to go away. I want people to have better access to quality products that are also not contributing to that bucket we talked about in the beginning, to contribute to that toxic threshold that we talked about in the beginning. I want things that help people's real essence come alive, that make them feel good about themselves and to meet the world in a different way. And you and your organization does that so beautifully, Amate. And I'm really honored that we got to have this really engaging conversation. Finally.
You're the best. I have one joke to say that mistletoe also is a community builder, since anyone that is below it has to kiss. So anyway, uh, listen, Nasha, you are incredible. I can't wait to see you in person again, which is like very soon in A4M. Yeah, but thank you so much for this time. It's, as always, it's an absolute pleasure.
My joy. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.